Thank you everybody for coming this morning. What's very exciting today is to take you through a couple of studies and some information that is unique to our business. But maybe I'll kick things off in the excitement of adding Singapore to our global roster of agencies. And for those of you who are not familiar with Ansible, so there's some statistics. There's a lot of hundreds of apps that we've created, thousands of campaigns we've run across the world, and we can take all of that knowledge, all of that code, all of that learning, all of those great innovations, and bring them to Singapore clients as of today and tomorrow. And there's a lot of capabilities within the broader business that goes everything from all marketing related services right through to enterprise type solutions for clients where we can actually help them be more productive and more profitable. Stuff like Salesforce enablement, inventory management, some of those areas of a client's business that we don't often interact with as much, where we have actually a lot of strength. And then certainly new areas such as chatbots and virtual reality and augmented reality. So there's a lot that we're bringing to the market and we can actually turnkey provide it to clients overnight. But that's not exactly why we're here today. We're here to talk to you about a study that we've done into the mobile readiness of brands, because whilst many of us get very excited about the possibilities of virtual reality and augmented reality and what's new and next, there are many, mobile plays such an important role in our daily lives that a lot of brands aren't actually doing the foundation work as well as they should. And that's really what this is about. When you live your day and the first thing that you do is probably check your email as you wake up, and then you order your coffee throughout the day, figure out what you're going to have for dinner, all of these things are done on your mobile. Indeed, it's within 1 meter of you for 90% of your entire day. So that plays a big role. When I was at university a long time ago, the model that we studied when it came to path to purchase and consumer engagement was all about AIDA. So we were able to, as marketers and advertising agencies, really control what order and what we told people, and they would have to follow what we said. They couldn't figure it out for themselves up until they didn't know a product was coming, up until we told them it was coming. They didn't have reviews up until we allowed them to be reviewed by professional reviewers. So we were able to control the process a lot, but now that's all gone out the window. The world that we live in these days, largely driven by digital fragmentation and possibilities, is now very confused. We go between all quadrants all of the time. But what's really important is the role that mobile device plays along the way. Indeed, it's the only media channel or communication device that has a role every step of the way. As you're shopping for a car, for example, the way that you will most likely find out about it is through something that you've seen on your mobile device. As you're in a supermarket trying to compare prices for a particular product or see if there's a coupon or a way of interacting with it, you're going to use your mobile device. Indeed, a lot of the purchases that we make now, especially I live in America, basically Amazon is almost like my homepage. So I don't go to search engines or other places initially. Amazon can actually give me the answers to what I want most of the time. So, mobile plays a big role every single step of the way, whereas television and print and other media don't have that opportunity. So the thing about our mobile experiences, and now I'm not sure of the exact statistics in Singapore, but I suspect that probably 60% of your web traffic is on mobile devices, is sort of commonplace. Therefore, more than 1 in 2 consumers are looking at your brands and trying to buy your products or learn more about your services through the mobile experience. And there's very high expectations that consumers have. So with the advent of global app stores, so iTunes and Google Play, our expectation now is that all apps and all web experiences are to the equivalent of Uber and Amazon and Facebook. That's what consumer expectation is. They don't care that you're a car manufacturer or marketer in Singapore. They don't care that you sell Hellmann's mayonnaise for Unilever in Brazil. Their expectation of mobile experiences is very high because they're exposed to those. Whereas in the past, again, when you think back, different countries would be able to communicate in the right ways to those audiences. Now we have global expectations. And the implications of getting user experience wrong within mobile are significant. You know from your own behaviour that as you go to a particular website on your mobile and you can't access it without pinching and pulling, and the menus don't work and you can't click on things, it's a really bad experience, and we won't put up with that. we'll, within 2 to 3 seconds, we'll press that back button and then we'll go to a competitor. So that's a very big implication for brands. And all of this money that you guys are spending on television and print and out of home, you're spending all this money to get people to a destination, and we know that somewhere between 1 in 2 or 2 in 3 of them are going to mobile first. If they have a bad experience, you've wasted all your money. You've wasted your money, and you've also disappointed them to the point where it will statistically take 3 to 6 months till they even try your site again. So it's a very big opportunity, but it's also very big implications of getting it wrong. But if you do actually take a step back and have a look at the foundations of your user experience and what your customers are trying to do, then there are good opportunities and uplift if you get it right. And here's just a few statistics of companies that have done that. So we are now in 16, 17 countries around the world as our business, and we're fortunate enough to work with the likes of from Johnson & Johnson through to ExxonMobil, through to Chrysler, BMW, Kia, you name a leading brand in the world, and Ansible is fortunate enough to work with them. However, we can't have all these one-on-one conversations with every brand in the world to talk them through what needs to improve to be better in the mobile space. So what we did was we launched a study called the MDEX, so it's the Mobile Index. And we were the only agency in the world that was actually given a keynote slot at the Mobile World Congress. So, an event where 120,000 people around the world attend. We did this study in consultation with Google and also a global research firm called YouGov. So before we jump in to the results from that study, and especially how it impacts brands within Singapore, we'll take you through a brief video showing you the methodology and how we came up with this study.
Whether on the go, at the office, or somewhere in between, mobile users always have their phones within reach. They want them to be fast, intuitive, easy. And to make sure they're getting the best mobile experience possible, brands need to take full advantage of the smartphone's capabilities. But despite that, sometimes mobile experiences can let users down.
Thanks to smartphones, everybody has the internet in their pocket.
But the mobile web is really at odds with what everybody does on the web, which is surf and browse, and that should all be fast and easy, and right now it just isn't.
So this thing which should be a source of utter wonder is a source of frustration.
Waiting.
Not letting me scroll.
Now it's loaded.
People bounce. So if the page doesn't load within a couple seconds, they move on to the next page.
That is the worst possible outcome for everyone involved.
That's why we created the MDEX, Ansible's extensive mobile study and ranking of top brands around the world. Spanning 15 countries, the MDEX evaluates mobile assets from over 2,000 brands. We determine final rankings by using qualitative and quantitative research methods, as well as our own Ansible insights and analysis. These rankings were based on brand performance in several key categories: the discoverability of a mobile website or app in search results, how effectively a website is optimized for mobile, how user-friendly and intuitive a mobile experience is, the ease of navigating a mobile site and accessing its content, and the ability to drive users to follow through with desired actions. Speed tests were conducted with webpagetest.org, using mobile browsers with real-time mobile connection speeds for multiple locations worldwide. Finally, Google Tools determined each brand's mobile search result, page insights and friendliness score, and mobile site and app design principles according to their metrics. In partnership with YouGov Omnibus, we learned what mattered most to mobile users, and we use those findings to appropriately weigh the categories of our mobile asset reviews. The result is a global study that reveals brands' mobile strengths and opportunities to improve. This is the MDEX.
So let me just recap on a few of the key points around the study. So it's 15 countries. It was over 2,500 brands in the end. Each of those brands we assessed on how well how their presence and performance is within mobile for both mobile web, iPhone or iOS app, and also Android app. each of those could be out of 60 different criteria. So one brand might have 180 different data points that we've assessed for that individual brand. But we knew that not all of those would be held equal. So some of those data points could include things like how well does it feature within search? Does it have site search within the actual site itself? What are the app rankings? And then more technical things like what plugins are used? Is it pulling data from a server that actually may slow it down? Can I double click on an image to have it increased? 180 different criteria is what we assessed. And we knew that they weren't equal, so what we did was we did a consumer survey of 2,000 Americans. We had actually a look at, we did a dip into India, the US, and then also I think it was either Mexico or Brazil, to see if there were major changes in consumer preferences when it came to features and how sites and apps worked, and there actually weren't. So understanding that, then we went into more depth in the US, and then we weighted it accordingly. So when we have a look at the 5 different buckets that they fall in, so up to 180 criteria fall into these 5 different buckets. And we're going to give you a highlight of some of what best practices and brands are doing in that space. When we roll up the global rankings, here's what it looks like. So there's some familiar company at number 1, which is fantastic, and we'll go into a bit more detail as to why they are there. And I think if you're a marketer for 7-Eleven, you would be high-fiving down the hall, right? You'd be like, if you're the CMO, have a look at the scoreboard. So Facebook's number 1, Amazon 2, and 7-Eleven number 3. You'd be very proud of your results. Because, out of global brands, and OLX is a classified site within the Latin American countries. So if you're not familiar with them as a brand, it's not quite an Amazon or an eBay, but it's sort of in that space. So 7-Eleven, so why did they do well? They're a convenience store chain. At the end of the day, this study is not subjective. It's not about, does it give a great brand experience? Does it make me add a brand to the shopping list and increase my consideration levels? All of those softer, subjective brand measures aren't taken into account. This is based on the data around the mobile experience and does it satisfy consumer expectations at the end of the day. Now 7-Eleven did really well because they, if you're going to the 7-Eleven site, why are you going there? You're going there to find a store or a service station, depending on which part of the world you're in. You might be going there to find, does it have an ATM or does it sell food or does it, is it a service station and I can get petrol there? What prices, so what products can I buy? What are the prices for those? So there's some very simple needs as to what you're looking at for a 7-Eleven site. And they answer them perfectly. They answer them perfectly in a really fast experience. It's very easy to navigate and get around. When I have a look at why would I go to a 7-Eleven app experience? So the app experience is all about loyalty, consumer promotions, tailoring offers, and that's exactly what I want to go there for. And again, it's highly rated. It does what it needs to do for the consumers. So that's why they featured so prominently. So then, if we have a look at Singapore, Scott's going to take us through Singapore overall and then some of the individual brands.
I feel like we should have a drum roll, but we're not going to. We'll just show you the list. As Trav said, the Singapore MDEX was done in exactly the same process, the same time as doing the global approach as well. So we find here are the top 10, as you can see them yourself. Some are surprising, some maybe not. Clearly Uber's in there, Nike, Singapore Airlines. But I think what's quite interesting is the likes of LVMH from a master brand perspective. DBS is an incredibly interesting one. I mean, we all probably use internet banking a lot and sometimes it could be incredibly frustrating, but this is a fantastic brand experience, which we'll take you through a little bit in more detail in a second. And then specifically some of the other ones, homegrown, such as Capitaland. So to bring those 5 categories to life a little bit, we wanted to kind of dig into each of them for you to give you a brief overview of why we felt these ranked very well. And as Trav said, these are quantitatively studied. So it's not our subjective recommendation. It's actually driven through all these specific data points. We're actually going to start with Amazon. As you might notice, Amazon is not necessarily in the top 10. But what we found through the global index of all the brands that we studied, that 70% of the brands studied actually scored incredibly well in this category, 20 out of 20. And I think that's probably because the majority of people have focused primarily around ensuring that their sites are discoverable. It's pretty much a 101 these days. And we find in the first two categories that a lot of the brands globally and in Singapore have done incredibly well. Where Amazon really trumps in this category is specifically around its connection into search intent. So anytime you look for anything to do with the product that Amazon sells, both in terms of paid search and organic search, it ranks incredibly highly. Not just ranking and driving to their site, it'll take you to a very specific page which is mapped exactly to the product, or at least similar product that you're actually looking for. From a mobile perspective, the experience is pretty seamless. You're able to scroll through, select the image. You can, usually with some of the images, you can delve a little bit more into the experience of the product. You can put it into cart and you can purchase straight away. So we feel this is probably one of the best in-class examples of discoverability from a mobile perspective, both in terms of the mobile site and the app. So please always remember that when we talk about site, if the brand had an app as well, that would be included within the study also. So we made sure that we were able to rank across both of those experiences. Secondly, KFC. Hands up who regularly goes to KFC. You can admit it, it's absolutely fine. Thanks, Jeff. KFC, homegrown, obviously a global brand, but very much franchise-based. So a lot of the investment and experience that goes behind this type of brand in the market is very much driven by the people that run the franchises in each of the markets. And they did incredibly well in terms of their mobile optimized score. Maximum you can get is 26. They scored about 22.8 exactly, actually. And where we feel they've done incredibly well is the way that they've structured the site. They're making sure the images are big, they're optimized to every single size of mobile possible. It's right within the viewpoint when you're looking for a product. They've actually done quite a lot of work in the back end in terms of the coding. So all the code is compressed and zipped in an incredibly fast file format. It calls a server that responds literally probably with anything from 1 to 2 seconds. Normal bounce out rate on mobile and even desktops about 2 seconds. So this is a phenomenally fast site, hugely visible, really easy to scroll through, so it gets your thumb going. And actually the most important thing, if you think about probably 12 o'clock, 12:30 in Singapore when everybody's getting hungry, the number one thing that you want to do is order chicken, supposedly. And it does work incredibly well. I was actually quite surprised when I looked through it myself, because I'm not a massive regular purchaser of KFC, to be honest. But obviously in doing this study, we made sure that we did go to every single site that we studied. And I was actually incredibly surprised. They've also got quite a lot of video embedded, which opens really nicely. You can close it really quickly. It actually works. It doesn't take you to YouTube. It's fully integrated. It's actually a phenomenal experience. So moving on to criteria number 3, we've got navigation and content. And again, I was quite surprised that a bank would actually score incredibly well in this category. I bank with a number of other banks within the region and from the UK, and I would probably admit that their experience completely and utterly sucks. And I've never tried to log in via mobile phone, but this one works really, really well. They scored 28.57 out of 32 across all the criteria, which is incredibly impressive. Once you get through the first screen, the navigation is incredibly clear. Big, chunky blocks that fit beautifully into your screen. You can get straight to where you want to get to. I actually played around quite a bit with the credit card selection function. So I usually have credit cards that help rack up miles, because I like racking up miles, clearly. And like traveling, not a lot of shopping, more traveling. And this had a really great feature where you could go in, you can select the different types of credit cards, whether it's lifestyle rewards, whether it's miles that you're looking for. Very simple, fast comparison even on the mobile on such a small screen. And then you could literally click to apply. You know, and you think about why we use mobile. We're doing it because we've got an instantaneous need. We want to get something done really quickly. It really drives you through to the experience that you want. And in the later categories, you know, they actually scored incredibly well in terms of driving action as well. So I think this is a phenomenal example, and great to see something like a financial institution doing well in this category, where normally we see some of the bigger, more modern or slightly more consumer-facing kind of brands doing very well. So looking at utility and usability, this is the LVMH corporate website. They also scored incredibly well in regards to this section. So did DBS, actually, to be fair. They scored roughly about 25.8 out of 32. I think what's really nice about this site, And some of you probably know some of the brands that they have under here, some of the whiskey brands or the champagne brands that they have, and even some of their luxury products. The navigation is incredibly simple. You never get lost. The navigation's always there with you. It's really quick to get to a certain brand, to find out more information. It'll take you straight to the brand's, that designated monobrand website. You can click on the images. They'll pop up really nicely. It just gives you a really great experience that gets you to where you need to get to really quickly. And I think a lot of brands, not just in Singapore, but even around the world, forget about how they can collate everything that they offer at a master brand level. So I think LVMH do a fantastic job, and I was actually quite surprised again that this one came up, considering it is master brand, because a lot of brands don't bother at that type of level. They make sure that the mono brand itself works incredibly well. So this one was super, super interesting. And actually the search function works, which when you go to a lot of different mobile experiences, the search function is the one that usually takes you to some random Google result because they couldn't be bothered building their own search functionality. But these guys have done incredibly well. Last but not least, Shangri-La. This is obviously a homegrown Southeast Asian brand. And again, I actually worked on this for probably 5 years before I moved over to Mediabrands, not specifically on the mobile experience, but just on the advertising side. And I know that Shangri-La have spent a lot of time looking at the actual mobile experience and the experience of the consumer. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next maybe year and a half, you'll start seeing in Shangri-La hotels the ability to connect your mobile device and even the app through to full in-hotel experiences, whether it be concierge, whether it be in-room dining, whether it be unlocking your door with your mobile phone. A lot of the areas that they're sort of looking to investigate. They didn't make it into the top 10, unfortunately. That's because they didn't score as well in the other criteria. But in this criteria, they scored 31.73 out of 32, which is pretty phenomenal. The reason being, as you'll have seen from the video, if you're looking for a property, it takes you through to a really visual screen that lets you choose between the continent that you want to go to. So you're getting straight into a really nice filtered experience. It's very easy to choose the hotel you want to go to. You can, as you go through the booking process, if you're already a registered user, Golden Circle member, you just log in straight away. It'll pull all your contact information and your historical purchase information and even your loyalty status straight into the screen. You can literally book probably within 5 to 6 steps, which I think is incredibly important in this day and age, especially when you consider the super high percentage of hotels that are booked within either 48 hours, 72 to 48 hours, and amazingly within a 6 to 12 hour window, especially in places like Singapore where there's a lot of inbound traffic, inbound travel for business, even places like China where you find people decide instantaneously after 4 to 6 hours that they want to stay overnight an extra night. So it's incredibly important for hotels that this functionality is easily and readily available, because as we said earlier, if the experience isn't there, you literally will click and you'll go somewhere else. So just to wrap up my little section before we hand back to Travis to look at some of the innovation pieces. As Lee quite rightly said, it's great today that we're able to launch Ansible here in Singapore. We've launched quite a few of our markets across the region. Singapore is obviously our HQ, so we're very proud to have the capability here, and to David for helping to make that happen as well. There'll obviously be more to come. But obviously with Ansible being here in the market, if any of your organizations are interested in having any further discussions, we have a number of opportunities both with localized MDEX for single brands or deep dive mobile experiences and strategies moving forward if you're interested in talking. So just to wrap up, if we've got any questions in regards to MDEX in general, the methodology, the partners that we worked with, or even the Singaporean study, we can open to the floor for some questions.
What we're looking at doing around about the time of the Mobile World Congress in Shanghai, or exactly at that time, is launching a follow-up study for more markets within Asia Pacific. So we're looking at, I think, 8 additional markets across APAC that we're going to be analysing. However, we're able to do any brand in any market, any time. So this isn't, what we're trying to do is create as an index. We will be releasing and updating it across all of those countries every Mobile World Congress, which is February, March timing, to then have a look at who's improved, who's dropped, what are some of the key drivers, are those criteria that we had last year as important, and are they weighted differently by consumers? So we're able to have a look at that. So we're launching a APAC-focused study with more countries starting in Shanghai on the start of June.
End of June.
End of June. And then we'll also be revising all of the data next February, March, for what will by then be somewhere around 25 or 30 countries around the world. Yeah. We thought there may have been differences. So then we did, as I said, a small dip into, I think it was India and also Brazil or Mexico. I can't remember the two. And there weren't significant differences in the weighting across those three countries. So then we did the more in-depth analysis within just a US audience. So I think, again, that comes back to the global nature of mobile experiences. I think that, website experiences, people expect them to be localized. They've got a greater tolerance for the infrastructure and the data speeds are slower in my country, or things aren't advanced. When it comes to mobile, nobody cares, because everybody in every part of the world has access to an Uber app, understands Amazon. Everybody's got the same Facebook in every part of the world, so that becomes the benchmark. So again, I think that's something to bear in mind, that you may have these infrastructure limitations that you go, hey, the reason we can't provide a great, rich, interesting, fast experience is because of the 3G connections in my country. Nobody cares. Consumers don't care.
Also to add, I think it's a learned experience. So mobile is only really, you could argue, taken off in the last, 5 to 8 years, give or take. And we've actually been told or shown how we should experience content or navigation on a site. I mean, Facebook does a great job of actually teaching us how to do certain things, and then some of that UX then gets pulled through to other websites. So maybe over the next, 3 to 5 years, we may see some slight differences across regions as, mobile experiences mature.
So the question was around what's a better e-wallet experience for mobile apps? I don't know if you want to take it. The thing is, this study didn't really focus on that as a particular feature or function. So where it comes into broader banking, we've had a look at how well banking sites work. But when it comes into e-wallet and methods of payment, that's not an area of sort of coverage within the study.
Yeah. So are you meaning specifically, say, for example, on the iPhone where you get the little wallet that comes automatically with it? So I would say it depends on, if I look at some of the kind of movement that's happening within China, WeChat's probably one of the biggest, fastest growing kind of payment options, specifically when you look at some of the different stores that you would go to. So I was in Shanghai a couple of months back, and everybody was paying with WeChat. Even the baristas pointing to the little WeChat symbol going, just pay with that. So I think it's not about that better than anything else. I think it's all down to where are consumers, where do they feel most comfortable in terms of transacting, who do they trust? And actually a lot of it is driven by the channel. So it's what the channel is pushing that's most important. In regards to kind of the little mini wallets that you would get embedded on an iPhone where you can put in, say, your boarding pass, I think the rise of that will come when brands start to actually create experiences that can take advantage of that. Because Apple is a great example of providing the potential for functionality, but it needs businesses and brands to be able to develop experiences that are synonymous with the services or the products they're offering for them to actually take off. So the study was specifically around usability, driving action, optimization. No, so it won't go into the business impact of brand X, because obviously that's something that we can't analyze.
Yeah. I think there's a logical link between people finding it a good site experience are more likely to buy something rather than if they were going to press the back button and go to a competitor. So it has to have an economic impact of getting this right. And you saw some of the case studies of anthropology and banks and whatever that I put up earlier. So it does translate, but unless we have each company's website, commerce data, we couldn't draw that exact correlation. But there's obviously a link between the two.
I mean, if you take the Shangri-La example, because I've done a lot of work on hotels, you just look at even some basic analysis that you can do with third-party tools and where their search traffic's coming from. The majority and the increase over the last 36 months has been around mobile. So you can derive the fact that their business is being driven by mobile.
Is one that are more important than the other?
Yeah, so in the white paper, and we haven't covered it extensively here, as Scott was talking through some of the criteria, you would have, the entire score that a brand can get is out of 140 is what it adds up to. The most heavily weighted amongst those, the last criteria, which is driving desired actions. Second, also on 32 points, is navigation and content. So to answer your question, what's the most important thing out of here? I would say, and it's actually the most important and the one with which brands scored the lowest on average around the world, is the final one, which is driving desired actions. And what that means is the consumer wants to form a relationship with your brand, and they want to do that through, and generally it's about data swapping. So they will either form a relationship with your brand through purchasing your product, joining a mailing list, having a chat with a live agent, requesting more information, registering for a test drive, anywhere where as a consumer, I'm giving up my data to get something in return. So that's what consumers actually say is the most important thing that they want to do on a site. And when you think about it, it makes logical sense. I'm going to a site for a reason, or an app for a reason. I want to be able to achieve that, and I want to be able to get something in return. And that's actually the area with which many brands perform the worst. When I have a look at, and I think it's covered in the study, but so navigation and content, Honda actually performed the best in the world. You could navigate up and down and around. They did it really, really well. They scored 0 for the category of driving desired actions. There was no way on Honda's site that you could register for a test drive, click to call a dealer, receive more information on something. And you're just going, what are they thinking? They've done it all really well in these certain areas, and every other auto manufacturer allows you to form that relationship. Their site is now a pretty brochure, but you don't put all this time and effort and marketing money into a pretty brochure. You want to be able to drive some sort of acquisition or relationship off the back of it. So that is the single most important thing, and it doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't take complex code. It doesn't take the best digital agency in the world to produce that. You just need to think about, what is the consumer going to my site and app for? Am I satisfying it? And am I getting some sort of data exchange to be able to follow up with them?
Get high scores with those mobile sites.
So the question was, do brands, to do well, have to have an app or a site? So this was really debated at the start, because my argument from a purist and mobile hat on is that a site should perform certain functions and an app should perform different functions in a different way. So that's the way I came into it. When we did the study, just like I was saying, consumers have an expectation that Ubers and Amazons and Facebooks are the mobile experiences that we want. They also don't understand or care about the differences between mobile, web and app. So they actually don't, we from a marketing and technical perspective go, an app can do richer features, it's got a lot of the code downloaded, it can be faster and seamless and pull in different sensors from the phone. So we as marketers understand the differences between the capabilities. Consumers don't care. So to answer your question is, you weren't negatively impacted with your score if you only had a mobile site, if it was a good mobile site. So I think there are a number of advantages to having a great app experience. And again, I stress the point that your app experience should not be a copy of your web experience. That's worst practice. But if you have a reason for your app that is separate to your web, I think it is worthwhile and important, but it's not actually critical to getting a high score.
And what we've seen in the region specifically is not people moving away from apps, but to Trav's point, thinking about what the functionality for an app experience is. So let's, again, take travel. Maybe there's more to do with managing your loyalty points, cashing in your loyalty points. I think there's a lot
being able to use NFC to open your door, having beacon enablement to allow it to be a tailored experience as you walk around the hotel or the cruise line. So there's certain things that apps can do that websites can't, and we need to differentiate between those two. And also the third pillar now, I'd argue, is chat experiences as well. So when we look at brand assets that are required these days, sure, you've got a desktop site. Your desktop site should be different different to your mobile site because you've got a different need state. There are different actions that you're looking to perform. So desktop website, mobile app, and chat experience, I think, are the 4 pillars that all brands need.
But an app's like a dog. It's not just for Christmas.
Yeah,
correct.
And same with chat experiences. They need to be considered long-term assets of brands, not just some sort of campaign-related experience.
What the mix is about between X and the what we do.
Again, think about the consumer experience as to what you're doing it for. Is it an information-based thing? How can I find... it probably doesn't need an app experience. I don't know off the top of my head what that would be. Is it... what different contexts are people looking for information on that? So is there a different need state to what you've got at home versus out and about versus somebody in a business? So can you tie that into location and tailor that experience? So it's everything is all about thinking through the customer's perspective as to why I'm trying to do something. I'll take us from ex-offenders into mayonnaise. So a bit of a leap. So we're working with Unilever on one of their mayonnaise products called Hellmann's. And they scored really badly. So out of 140, they scored like 60s and 70s. So not a very good score at all. And I said to the head of media, a guy by the name of Luis DiComo, I said, look, if you're at home and you're sitting on you're at home, what are you searching for a website on mayonnaise for? So you want to find recipes that you can make with it. You might have some sort of intolerance. Does it have eggs? Does it have, I don't know, peanuts? You may have all questions around allergies. You may just be prompted from a TV commercial and actually just want to find out more about what goes into the product, where was it made, what's the background. So that's a use case for at home. When I'm out and about, I might want to find a store that could actually sell it to me. Or indeed, if I'm in the supermarket, it's all about price comparisons and can I get a coupon for that? And the Hellman site answered none of those things. So put yourself in your consumer's shoes, regardless of what brand or business you're promoting. If I'm sitting at home, why did I go onto that site or that app, and what are my expectations, and have I answered those? When I'm at work and at a business, what are my expectations, and have those been answered? So that's the filter that you put everything through, regardless of whether it's a not-for-profit, regardless of whether it's a CPG or FMCG brand, or whether it's auto. So exactly the same. What does a consumer need, and have I answered it? Should be fairly simple, right? But not many people are doing it. And what they're also doing is they're just porting across their website experience. So again, if I take an auto brand, an auto on any given website has a lot of information. I can watch the car go around a track, I can spin it around, I can do 360-degree look inside, I can tailor the car, I can find a dealer, find what's in stock. I can do 100 things on an auto website. But what are the things that consumers are going to want on the mobile site? Again, if I'm prompted from a TV commercial, I might want to find out more information quickly about that car. I might want to compare it against the other models within the range to understand which one's right for me. Or if I'm out and about and I'm car shopping, then I want to find out where the nearest dealer is and what cars they've got in stock at the moment. So think which are, so those 4 or 5 key functions are the right ones for mobile. You wouldn't in front of that, and we saw this with one of the car brands, one of their biggest call to actions on the mobile site is download a 100 megabyte PDF that's done in A4, right? That's the dumbest possible thing you can do, because then you've got to, so it's going to chew up your data, it's going to be really slow, and you're not going to be able to read the thing. So, many reasons as to why that's not right. But many brands just go, hey, agency, can you just make my website fit on this smaller thing? And that's not the right way to think about it.
So we can do more Q&A at the end, but we just want to make sure we have enough time
we get to the next.
To move on to the next piece. So Trav's going to take us through some areas for innovation. He also looks after our Global Innovations Lab out of New York and a couple of other places around the world. So we're going to get a sneak peek into some of the cool stuff that's coming up. And maybe, I don't think you covered GeoSkin, but we can talk about that at another date.
Yes, sure. So we've talked about, I guess, the state of mobile, and to a degree, it becomes, your mobile device becomes your entry into most technology and user engagement moving forward. So let's talk about what's happening tomorrow, and not tomorrow as in 2 years down the track. You know, if I could predict that, I'd be not here. I'd be very, very rich. But what's happening over the next 6 months or so, and key areas that brands should actually take notice of right now. So fortunately, I attend, as you heard, I launched the MDEX at the World Congress this year. And for me, and I don't know if many of you have been to the one in Barcelona, and I haven't been to the one in Shanghai, but it's an amazing experience with hundreds of thousands of people, and it's the one that I think, it's the event that I think is most relevant to our industry. So when I also attend CES each year, and we do we have a series of events there, but it's everything from drones to robotic barbecue cleaners to 3D printing cutlery. All of this very consumer, double-barrel dishwashers, and then next year will be a triple load washing machine. It is very, very consumer-focused, and it's hard to actually find a lot of application to our industry. Then we have Cannes, which is very much about, innovation in marketing, but it doesn't really bring a lot of technology into it. I think that the World Congress is probably the best blend of both, and can actually take. And then you've got Demexco in Germany, which is very much ad tech. Marketing tech, DSPs, data, email marketing programs. So it's very, very techy. Mobile World Congress is a really good balance of both. It takes you to where the future is headed, and it also gives you the practical applications of it now. So we had about maybe 30 people across Ansible globally go along. And the thing about the exhibitors is you've got everybody from Huawei and ZTE as device manufacturers through to all of the infrastructure and component parts like a Qualcomm, and seeing what those chips are doing in various devices. And then you've got two guys with a laptop from Poland who have invented this new way of measuring audiences within retail environments that have high aisles and things like that, where line of sight measurement doesn't work. So they've got this great radar bat related kind of technology, and you go, wow, that's really cool. I can see how that can apply. So for those of you who haven't been, I'd definitely give it a go. Over the last few years, it is a mobile focused event. And it's just interesting seeing the headlines that they've gone to. So it's gone from the edge of innovation, it is this supercomputer that powers a lot of our consumer experiences, to saying that mobile is everything was last year. Now it's the next element. So it's actually going beyond being all pervasive and actually becoming such a part of our world, it's like another element. So I don't think that is a massive exaggeration. Where they go next year, I don't know. After we've become everything, then an element, I'm not sure what is... where they're going to go. But what underpins everything is 5G. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about coming up needs infrastructure to work, and the conference focuses on that as well. And here, many of you may know this, but some of you might find it interesting. So 5G is all throughout. There's a lot of money invested in it. There's estimates to build 5G will cost about $300 billion for the US, and also about $300 billion incremental investment for Europe. And I haven't seen a number around Asia, but I'm sure it's similar. The thing about 5G is that only 70% of the US is currently on 4G, and about 40% of Europe is currently on 4G speeds. So we're already moving forward to the next thing, because there's a lot of opportunity and commercial benefit for both telcos and device manufacturers. If we can create a new standard, then a lot of investment is going to go into it, and we can get a lot of consumer dollars. But in summary, what 5G is, and this might be a little hard to see from the back, and especially with me standing in the way, and when we have a look at downloading a movie, on 3G, it would take 26 hours to download it, 4G, 6 minutes, and 5G, 3.6 seconds to download that exact same file. But what's important also with 5G is that it also has an impact on battery as well. So you know that battery is one of the biggest issues that we all have with any of our devices. It's one of the biggest things holding back wearables. If you've got to charge your Fitbit, your GoPro, your whatever, mine, I've got about 5 of them. They're all sitting in a drawer next to each other. They don't really come out that much anymore. It's a real barrier on some of the devices. Latency, so the actual speed and responsiveness I'll talk about in a moment, that improves massively. No black spots is also critical, and I'll explain why. So what are some of the logical areas that will be impacted by much faster bandwidth to devices? So being always connected across industry and being able to do things across the world in a more seamless way. So whether that's, say, an expert, so somebody in Africa needs to have a specific heart operation or brain operation and it's time critical, being able to instruct from the other side of the world to be able to do that is really important. When we look at managing disasters, so the speed at which we can get responsiveness, milliseconds and seconds and minutes can make a big difference on containing that fire, that flood, that burning building. If we can do everything faster, we can be far more responsive. And then also we've got the Internet of Things. So you know everything is becoming connected, whether it's your dishwasher, your microwave, your car, your home, your watch. So the amount of devices that are going to be connected to the internet is exploding massively. The current infrastructure can't handle it. So the telcos around the world don't have enough bandwidth and capability to be able to manage all of that. So what is happening is the spectrum or the signals that are getting sent across the air is getting split into different tiers. So your dishwasher that reorders tablets when it's running low doesn't need the world's fastest connection. It can operate on a 2G or 3G speed. Whereas if you're operating on somebody's brain from across the world, you do need it to be super fast. So there's a splitting of capabilities there. What's interesting is when I talked about latency before, so this guy, obviously moving his hand and loving it, very enthusiastic, the signal from that actually went from him to Germany, to China, to somewhere else, I think it was Australia, then back to Barcelona. So it's done a lap of the world and it pretty much moved in time with him moving. So, it's very, very fast. We know that even when we're talking on the phone these days across the world, it's not like it used to be where you could complete a whole sentence before the other person could speak, but there is still that delay. So, when we think about that in the phone sense, what does that mean for actual data that we're sending? It'll be much faster and simpler. When we have a look at cars are going to be one of the big beneficiaries of 5G. And the reason one of the key reasons comes back to the no black spots area. So hopefully that black spots translates, but areas that don't have coverage. So you can imagine if you're in an autonomous driving car and it's doing 120 kilometers down the freeway and it loses the connection, what happens? Does it stop? Does it crash? Does it go into the car in front? What happens? And so that's a big problem. So 5G enables it to have a very quick responsiveness and also allows it to always be connected. So as that car in front, a boulder comes down from the hill into the car in front. The car in front senses it. The car in front then sends a signal up to the internet and back to your car, telling you to change lanes within the next second. That will save your life. So all of this connectivity and speed and sensors is reliant on 5G. It's one of the biggest use cases for building the infrastructure. So there are trials of 5G going on from 2018 in different parts of the world. The idea is that it becomes a prevalent technology by 2020. So the Internet of Useful Things. So the Internet of Things has been out for a while, but I think one of the biggest observations that our team has made is around where things are headed in terms of devices. So here's the guy who, Jim Barksdale, he started Netscape, so one of the old browsers, and was very visionary and pioneering within the tech space. He said at the time, and this was I think 10 or so years ago, there are only two business models, bundling and unbundling. So when we have a look at devices, essentially there are brands, and Facebook's one of them, Snap is another one, and Apple are actually a lot of the, there was a famous picture of a, do I have it next? No. There's a famous picture of a catalogue from a company called Radio Shack, so an electronics retailer. And in 2007, the iPhone was invented. This print ad was taken from 1997, so 10 years prior. And every single feature within, every single product within that print ad then became in the iPhone. So it sold cameras, it sold fax machines, it sold pages, it sold phones, it sold maps and direction devices. All this whole page of devices was sold from an electronic retailer. 10 years later, all fit in an iPhone that big. What's interesting is that now many of the features that are within this device are now coming out of the device again. So when we have a look at the ability to check my emails, see what time it is, understand how many steps I've taken, I can now do that with my watch. When I think about being able to use the speaker and whatever, I've now got wireless headphones that also are able to command, you can tap and use commands on that to actually operate what you do with your phone. So it's becoming a new interface to engage with the device. Indeed, the camera, and obviously a big focus for Facebook as well, the camera is coming out of the phone. So the camera is then moving into things like Snap with the spectacles. So separating those functions from your phone is really interesting. And another one is around voice assistants and digital assistants. So in the US at the moment, there are estimated to be about 14 million Amazon Echo devices. So you're probably familiar with what they are. So a tube that's connected to the internet, you talk to, and it gives you answers. And the growth of that around the world is not actually predicted to be that massive as standalone devices. But what we're finding is companies like Apple with Siri, obviously Google with Google Home, Amazon with Alexa are now building into more and more devices. So they may not be standalone anymore. I may not be asking Amazon Echo, what products to buy, what's the weather like, what's the traffic like. I may be talking to my microwave that has that same functionality built in. So as standalone devices, there are many of them around the world, but the actual growth is going to come from embedding that voice interface into existing devices. There's a statistic by Gartner that 30% of all searches will be completed without a screen by 2020. And that's a big focus for us and what we're doing with our clients. And we've got what they're called skills, but they're basically apps that sit on this platform that we're building in travel and for auto and insurance, because moving forward, that will be the way that we speak to brands. And just like at the moment, you've got Google search results that on a desktop, you've got 15, 20 options that come up in front of you as you search for electronics or any single device or purpose. When you ask this one question, you get one answer. You don't get 20 different links and options because you just can't do that using voice. So it's really important that brands get ahead of this and develop those skills and get their consumers thinking about what commands and brands and terms they use when they're speaking with these devices, because you will only get one answer. So moving forward, when I'm looking for travel and I want to go from New York to Singapore, I will ask it one question and I won't get 20 answers. I will get one option, and it will tell me the fastest, the cheapest, the best quality airline. So you need to make sure that it'd almost be like if somebody said to you, I don't know how long Google's been around for, let's say 20 years. If somebody said 20 years ago, you could secure the #1 Google search result for your category for the rest of ever, if you just invested now and you spent some money and built up brand awareness of that, would you have done that? Of course you would have in hindsight. It would be that important to your brand. So making sure that you're prevalent within these new spaces and you're the first one in there, and things like Apple TV apps as well. There aren't many brands playing in that space, but they're really important and they're going to grow for consumers. Samsung Bixby, so also getting into this space, they're late and doing their own thing, but that's kind of what Samsung does. They're late and then they go their own path. Sometimes they continue with them, sometimes they wrap them up, but they're hoping to also play up against Siri and other devices, other services, but be more contextually relevant is their is their angle. So because it will largely be on the device, they're saying it will understand your history, your location, your preferences, your relationships between your family and friends to give you more accurate results off the back of it, but we'll see what happens. I think one of the most interesting plays within this, so obviously we're in APAC, Line is a really prevalent communication tool. What they're doing in this space, so we've got the device that looks not dissimilar to an Amazon Echo or a Google Home at the moment, but what they're doing is taking it to the next level and actually putting a screen on it, and also tying it better into the actual messaging service. So I can continue a conversation between them. So I could start a conversation in my lounge room. I could then continue it on, so for example, I'm looking for, I don't know, a great restaurant to eat at tonight. And so I can have a conversation with that. It can make some suggestions, and then it can send the information through to my app and messaging platform to then continue that conversation, to give me directions, to find out more, to compare. Whereas at the moment, both Google and Apple, those are discrete experiences. So even if I talk to Google Home about and have a request, it's not then remembered or reflected in my search results or mapping activities. They've actually tied it together better than others. So that's sort of, in my opinion, leading the way as to where things will head here. No doubt it won't take long for Amazon to wrap a screen around the devices and catch up. Chatbots and AI, I've talked about previously. I think that is the latest area where brands should build ongoing assets. And it's it's doing very well for brands. So this is one that we created for Kia. It was written up by Forbes and other publications as the best branded chatbot. And it's amazing the results that it's driving. So for example, this car is meant to sell, I think the target's about 40,000 cars a year in the US. We're having 50,000 unique people having a conversation with it per month. And in the last 6 months, we've had 1 million conversations about the vehicle. And because it's an electric hybrid vehicle, what does that do? How does that work? Will it run out of batteries? How do I charge it? All of those questions that consumers have, you can answer in an engaging, multimedia, factual, helpful manner that provides utility. So we've got 20 different chatbots that we're building for clients, from airlines through to CPG, through to auto. This is a major area, and it's actually driven the lowest leads, the cost per lead, out of any of their digital activities. So we launched a car with a conversation, and it's been very successful. Here's another example of the Internet of Things and where things are headed. So Ford have actually moved from being just an auto company to moving to a transport company where they have bikes and scooters and other things. Now they're actually looking at what does movement mean for brands. So they're moving beyond what we think of them in terms of cars. So movement is actually taking into account the moving around the home. It's also being able to order in a seamless way products and services delivered to the home that they're actually complete through autonomous driving vehicles and drones. So it's really interesting for companies to take a step back and go, what does my business look like today? And if everything becomes connected in a more seamless way, what is my business actually about? So Ford is not thinking, we are about making more cars. They are thinking about what does transport and movement mean to the future, and how can we play an active role there? So retail innovation. So there was a big focus on that. This is a great example where we've got a person who's gone into a change room and recognizes how old she is, what her style is, what colors she's wearing, her skin and complexion and eye color, and tells you recommendations off the back of that. And within that environment, I can actually add it to the cart. I can search for more products. I can take a photo. I can share it with my friends. So having change rooms and retail connected can lead to more sales, better customer experience. Robots, big focus. So this was one going around, and you could speak to it about the day, get information, send information, press the buttons, watch videos. You could do a lot within the robot environment. So we're talking with auto manufacturers at the moment, especially within the US, where we have such diverse language and population, from Hispanic through to Chinese, through to every nationality in the world is represented. So imagine a car experience, like a car dealership experience, where if you speak Chinese, that person, that robot will be able to speak Chinese to you for that entire conversation, take you to the cars and explain it to you. So there's that. There's also within hotels, being able to, and this exists, I don't know if I haven't seen it in Asia yet, but in some of the hotels in the US, there are robots that will check you in. So you don't have to wait at the reservation line for that. It actually comes up, enter your stuff, it dispenses a key, and then you go off to your room. So the efficiency, and again, think about the language barriers there. So as people are turning up to hotels and they want to speak their native language, the robot can do it, whereas the human can't necessarily do it. And they can give you more advice, they can give you more real-time information. So a concierge, and you ask for what the latest restaurant is. Well, the concierge human may remember what the coolest restaurant was 2 months ago, but that changes very quickly. So a robot, to actually be able to pull up those right reviews and information and tailor it by demographic, because it's connected to the internet, is able to give you a far better experience. So robots within retail environments is happening already in hotels across the world, and will be in other retail environments shortly. Enhanced experiences. So again, talking about how we can use connectivity to drive better consumer engagement. Here's an example from a cruise line where you wear it's basically a beacon on your wrist that will allow you to do everything from engage with the content, tailor your experiences to what you did yesterday. So if you went on a tour, you did some scuba diving and whatever else, it'll go, this is the ideal itinerary for you tomorrow, knowing exactly where you've moved, what you've done, what you've liked. You can pay for it. So you've probably seen the Disney Magic Band that allows you within Disney parks to have enhanced experiences and open your hotel room, whatever. That's now getting really expanded out by other travel companies. But also imagine an airport experience where you have somebody who's old. And airport experiences can be quite intimidating. There's a lot going on. They're loud. They're complicated. So to be able to guide somebody around through that, and as the screens come up, they'll point to which gate lounge they should be going to. They'll give them information. So think about, and it doesn't have to be a separate device. It can actually be done through your phone as well, using that as a beacon. Think about what those enhanced consumer experiences could be to then sell more stuff. So if I'm connected and it's got all my data, I'm going to go on that extra tour. I'm going to go and eat in the more expensive restaurant and drink the more expensive wine if it understands more about me, just by connecting with the human. Augmented and virtual reality, big focus and excitement for many brands at the moment. It's interesting to have a look at the progression of different technologies. So, when things go from being a crazy idea through to creation, deployment, and maturity, so mobile is certainly on the scaling and maturity spectrum. But then, as Facebook and Zuckerberg have talked about, is this the next age of computing? Is this the next big focus that brands should be thinking of? And there's a lot of speculation that it will be. When we have a look at the growth of VR, you can see that it's now getting to that sort of hockey stick. So it's been flat for a while, and now with more devices, you've got, Oculus giving headsets with and tying in with Samsung VR. You've got PlayStation and the computer processing power of the PlayStation enabling richer VR experiences. You've got Google distributing and many brands distributing millions of cardboard experiences around the world. So our consumer understanding and availability for virtual reality and augmented reality experiences is is very significant. And you can see some brands getting into this in big ways. But you can imagine it's also very chicken and egg, because whilst the numbers at the moment are small, it's a very engaged audience, but it's hard for marketers to spend a lot of money on that environment when the reach may be small. But then also for the content creators, it's hard for them to build the reach and build the interest if they don't have commercial partners to do it. So it's a bit chicken and egg, but some of the big brands in the world, such as Unilever, are now putting a concerted effort into owning and maximizing their space. Indeed, for some brands, so one of our beer brands in the US, we're actually doing virtual reality product placement. So we have there's a virtual reality app or game called Pool Nation. So it's like you're in a bar and you're playing snooker or pool. We're now putting dynamic beer brand product placement within that, so you can drink a beer during that game. However, virtual reality, especially at the moment, is still coming back to so many, roller coaster experiences. Brands really haven't made the most of it. There aren't. Yeah, what's this guy doing? Flying, I think. I'm sure he's flying. Unfortunately, to show to consumers, these experiences are very dumbed down, and marketers just aren't really taking advantage of the full opportunity. But now that we can move our hands and it can understand where I am within space, there's going to be a lot more sort of possibilities opened up. And indeed, there's a company called Facebook that is even, this week at F8 announcing a lot more in this space. And whether it's going back to the spaces, which is for many of you who are old enough to remember Second World, that's very much what it reminds me of. You can imagine the product placement that will be in those environments, which I'm sure Facebook will be monetizing quickly. Also, the ability to build into and, the whole idea around the Snapchat spectacles and the likely movement forward for that is to turn it into augmented reality. So being able to augment your environment around the glasses. So that's their play within their space. They may actually move away from their existing, app type experience and move more into the hardware and augmented reality space. Is not a ridiculous prediction. So obviously other brands or other companies with massive global reach and audiences such as Facebook need to play in this space. But without having the hardware, having it on your device is really useful. But you think that also Google, they had the Google Glass, which was only ever really intended as a prototype and for developers, to get their head around. They've got to deal with Luxottica, so Ray-Ban and Oakley and all of those sort of sunglass brands. You'd expect Google to be launching something very shortly that will also compete in the augmented reality space using hardware. So that then, the possibilities are walking down the street and seeing that handbag, it pops up, what does that cost? Take me to where it is, and I can see a map and take me there. So the augmented reality future is going to be a big one, and obviously it's it's more accessible and easier to be larger in scale than virtual reality. But then we've got, and Facebook also is playing in that space. They talked about mind control. So in this example, this guy is just thinking about how to solve the Rubik's Cube, and it does it. There was another example at the World Congress where a guy was on like a motorized scooter and he was able to navigate around crowds just by thinking about it. So he was standing up straight and going turn right, turn left, and he's going at speed between people just by using his brain. So there's obviously Googles and Facebooks of the world focusing very much on how do we actually remove all of the friction of devices. Instead of what was, I've got to take the device out of my hand and click on buttons and open apps, which then turned into, can I separate some of those controls and do it on my watch, which is a bit more convenient, or press on those earphones and that'll be more convenient, to now, let's not press or touch on anything, let's just use our brain to make it happen. So that is actually, again, I've seen many prototypes of that, and at F8 this week, or last week I should say, there were a lot of announcements and talk about that. But then think of the other commercial applications of virtual and augmented reality. So here's a really cool example of being able to instantaneously translate. So you can imagine if you're traveling between countries, how good that would be. Try in different furniture, bring houses to life. So whilst at the World Congress there's so much stuff on roller coasters, that really isn't the key focus. I think there's a lot that you can do with this. Indeed, even in the sort of product development space. So here's Ford, and in order to test their new products, they'll put somebody inside a virtual reality environment and they'll do all their focus group testing on the different features and functions you want within that. So I can very easily change the dashboard, I can change the steering wheel, I can change where the controls are in a computer-generated way, and then do all of the product testing before I build my first model. So think about that from a brand's perspective as well. What testing can I do around my products and services rather than just actually have to build stuff? I touched on cars earlier and the importance of 5G within the growth there. Peugeot have their self-driving car, but it's probably the most connected across all of the different Internet of Things and devices. So from your car, it can tell you if you've left your lights on at home, you can turn your dishwasher on, you can order a meal, you can do everything in your entire connected world from the Peugeot car. So they've sort of linked together the connected home, the connected car, my apps, my phone, my social messaging, all of that, they've sort of linked together. So it's Peugeot, so it's not going to likely be globally dominant, but I guess it's showing that it is possible to bring all elements of the ecosystem together. Self-driving cars on their own, it's interesting to see the difference here between on the left-hand side is, are people willing to ride in a self-driving car? And 29% have said very likely, 29% likely, 19% neutral. But between those two, 58% are likely or very likely. So people are okay with it. Will you let your children ride in it? Nah. So it's really interesting to see the differences in public perceptions around safety and how that will all work. But what's great is there's this. And I'm not sure if they're in Singapore, they might be actually. So in 8 different countries around the world, there's a new race, which is like another Formula One type exhibition called the Robo Race. And these are autonomous self-driving cars with a bunch of sensors, and they go a couple of 100 miles an hour or a few 100 kilometers an hour in a racing setting. And just like the cars that we buy on the street, whether it's a Mazda or a Toyota or a Hyundai or a Kia or a GM or a Ford, are somewhat influenced by the technology and innovation within Formula One cars that trickles down and into that. That Robo Race will do the same thing for autonomous driving. So it will show us how safe they can be, under what circumstances they will still crash. Of course they're going to crash because it's a competitive environment. They're still going to take risks, not knowing what risks the other people can take. And these cars, because they're competing, aren't talking to each other. So it's not exactly the same as if you're driving down a freeway where the cars are talking to each other. But it's going to really heighten our understanding of what's possible, how fast they can go, and the technologies and sensors that are used within a high performance space will also trickle down to what it means for consumer vehicles. Gamification is another key theme. So how long did it take different media to reach 50 million as an audience? So you can see Angry Birds Space was 35 days versus the radio took 35 years. The actual winner is Temple Run 2. So it took 13 days, and out of interest, Pokemon Go took 18 days to reach that. So you can get mass audiences very quickly through gaming, and just like, here it's less, there's less proof needed because of the amount of gaming across Asia. But in America, there's still a perception that gaming is only done by 16 to 24-year-old boys on consoles in their bedroom, whereas it's obviously a mass engagement for across demographics. Indeed, over $100 billion is getting spent on the actual gaming segment. So it's massive and it's pervasive and it's across all demographics. What's interesting is brands using the gaming the psychology behind gaming and why we want to compete, why we want to see leaderboards, why we want to go to new levels, actually using that for commercial purposes in training their staff. So if you look after a brand that either has retailers, so shop assistants, if you're a financial services company that has brokers and advisors, if you have any frontline salespeople, this is actually something that we did for Intel. It was all about training their own staff and the staff of retailers to understand the difference between the Celeron versus the Pentium versus the Core versus, that's really confusing product matrices and feature sets. We actually trained up the staff and got 4 times the amount of sales out of training staff. So think about how gamification can actually work within your own training, compliance, sales teams, things like that. That may actually make a bigger difference to your brand sales than running a lot more ads. Security. So having gone through all of that, everything can be undone very, very quickly. So generally speaking, and all the surveys that I've seen and you may have seen around the world, people are okay giving up their data. You may not get the same result in Germany if you were to run it. The Germans are not okay giving up their data. But in most other parts of the world, people are okay giving up their data for new services and opportunities, and also, most importantly, personalization. So if I ask and again, what is often a mobile and app experience, to access your current location, to access your contacts, to be able to access your images and videos, you better have a good reason for doing that, and you should tailor your experiences to what that is. So as I allow Starbucks to have access to my location, it gives me offers that are tailored to exactly what I want, when I'm in a certain proximity to the retailer. Amazon are doing that very well with their retail stores that they're starting to launch around the world as well. Use all the data that they know about you across all of your experiences to really tailor that physical retail experience. There's rumors that Amazon may even buy one of the failing retail chains in America, like a Sears or something like that, for not just showroom purposes, but also as ways of getting warehouses closer to consumers where there are no warehouses at the moment. So there's a lot of speculation around that space. So make sure if I'm giving you my data or access to my world, you're using it for me. But then here's an example, and unfortunately they're a client. Fortunately they're a client, but unfortunately this happened to them. So Jeep, 2 guys hacked a Jeep in 6 minutes with a laptop. And so from that, they were able to control it. They were able to start it, stop it, make it go faster, turn it right. So, Fiat Chrysler then put out a quick update to that. But they just, these hackers just wanted to show in this whole Internet of Things how important security is. So I'm sure they've made plenty of mileage out of what they did. But it's so important for brands. When I've got so much data, and it can be personalized data, on, say, my wearables that understand everything from my heart rate, the medications I'm taking, the exercise I do, where I live, my family history. I've got all of this data stored within all of these different devices. My connected home, my connected car, my car knows exactly where I'm going, what I'm doing, who I'm doing it with. All of this information is really valuable, and you've seen, brands like eBay and Sony and others have massive hacks, and statistically every organization is hacked every year. Some of them we just don't hear about, and they're very small breaches, but every organization is getting hacked. So as we work in marketing or with marketers, it's important that we're still emphasizing how we're balancing budgets between them, because the most innovative, virtual reality, augmented reality, Internet of Things, all of this stuff that I've talked about, if you've done that really well, but you haven't actually allocated enough to the privacy and security part, or you haven't given it due consideration, everything can be undone very, very quickly. And indeed, this is actually US stats, but it just shows people's decline in trust within the internet as far as security goes. So people are actually not, due to privacy concerns, not due to relevance, not due to anything else, but due to privacy concerns, I'm not clicking on online ads. So I'm actually worried about what they will do. I'm not downloading an app or doing a product because I'm worried about the security associated with it. So having that security messaging in all of your communication, so your privacy is really important to us, blah, blah, blah. That's why we're asking for this information. Having those security seals and verifications done on your websites and assets is really important. And if you want to see whether you've been hacked and where your data is, and I can tell you that 3/4 of you will show up on here. So put in your Yahoo account, don't use your work one because that's probably not the one that you've used over the years and that it has been compromised. Put in your Yahoo, put in your Gmail, put in your AOL, put in whatever, and see where you've been, where it's been hacked. And I can tell you, I ended up about 5 different places. My data had been hacked. So fortunately, it's older stuff about me. It's not particularly in date, but it's worrying to see that that's there. So it's worthwhile going along. And then finally, in a world where all of these devices and capabilities are so prevalent and exciting, and there's all of this innovation and opportunity, the devices that had the most interest at the Mobile World Congress, old Nokia, that is actually not even a smartphone, right? So you can't download apps on it. You can't use all those features, functions. You can only use the buttons. So that actually had the biggest queues and the most PR around that device, not the latest ZTE, not the latest Samsung, not the latest, any of those devices. That was the one that had the biggest queues. And it's going to sell for, I think, $39 or $49 around the world as a really simple phone. So will that appeal more to youth? Also, when we have a look at, a lot of the everything old is new again. There's lots of sort of nostalgia within advertising, taking it back to earlier times. Is there going to be that trendiness and novelty value about not having the smartphone moving forward? And so what are the implications for marketers? So, if we get mass adoption of dumb phones, how do we actually use SMS? And how do we use all of these previous techniques that we sort of gave away many years ago to connect with audiences who are using things this way? And we'll probably look to Africa in particular, where feature phones are still prominent, and you can still do mobile wallets via storing money on the SIM card. You can still check stock and grain prices. You can still, so could this actually become the new standard for a degree of the population, and what are the brand experiences there? And the other one, which is again out of the blue, is the latest BlackBerry had a lot of interest about it. So, everything old is new again. It's running Android, so it's at least a platform that we can develop on quite easily. But it's just interesting to see the mobile world that we thought was fairly stable and clear, still continuing to fragment. So that is running on time and a lot of content for today. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just in practical terms for me, first of all, talking about MDEX, I think you have 2,000 brands on that study at the moment. Not all of the brands in this room will currently be on the study. My first question is there a way for people in this room to maybe get their brand into the study moving forward?
Yep, just tell us.
Okay.
Yeah, so tell Dave and his team we can run the data from start to finish. It takes probably about a week or so. We're happy to do your first brand for free, but then beyond, so to give you a taste of what it looks like and your main competitors, so a couple of competitors, it does take us about a week to put it out. So if you happen to run Unilever or Johnson & Johnson or any of those brands and want us to do the entire portfolio, that would take a bit of time, so we'd have to discuss how we would do that for you. But it's as simple as contacting the Singapore team to get us to run that for you.
Okay, great. And one more quick question. The second part of the presentation on the future, on innovation, sitting here in Singapore, maybe it's difficult to think about how you get started. with all these things, with AI, with augmented reality, what it means for you as a marketer here and how you can take advantage of it. Do you have any advice about what maybe people in this room could do first to think about how they future-proof themselves?
So the first thing I would do in this space is get your foundations in order. So as I talked about the MDEX and what that means, whether you use our MDEX or whether today has sparked you to think more about your foundations and assets and consumer engagement with that, you want to make sure that you are converting people and giving them good customer experiences, or else, again, making the point, you are wasting a lot of your marketing dollars if you're then not paying it off with the places people are going. So that's the first thing to do, regardless. As far as artificial intelligence and virtual reality and augmented reality, the first thing that we need, there isn't an answer as to what you should do next. The first thing is to come up with what your problem is. So instead of looking for that new shiny technology for the sake of it, that's probably the worst thing that you can do, because you won't do it right. You'll have a bad experience. It won't deliver any of your actual business results because you're creating the first virtual reality mouthwash experience. May not be exactly what, technology for the sake of it isn't the right way to go. What is your brand problem? Is it actually explaining a complex product to consumers, which the Kia Niro bot did? So it helps you understand how electric hybrid vehicles work, what's available, answer all of those questions in a multimedia, interesting way. It wasn't, let's do a chatbot for the sake of it and just be able to change the colours of the car. That's not the right reason behind it. Is it actually about tying into retail in new ways? Is it about changing and enhancing your distribution techniques? So could second screen TV experiences that you press a button and takes you away to another environment that we can then order directly from the manufacturer or from the brand, is that actually the answer to your problem? So I'd say don't think about the technology, think about the problem, and let us help you with diagnosing what the right technology is to go there. Because across all of our offices and our 400 or so brands that we've got a dozen virtual reality things that we've created for brands. We've got 20 or 30 chatbots. We've got every technology. We've done wearables for glasses and watches. We've got all of these learnings now in Singapore and accessible through the rest of our world and those offices to apply to your business challenges. So the solution that you think might actually be the way to go might not be the right one. It actually might be another technology that either isn't in Singapore or you haven't heard of or you didn't think could be applied in a certain way. So the most important thing is to come up with the challenge and then speak to us and through the Singapore team, access our hundreds of people globally who have that experience who can help you.
And there are some countries, especially in Asia, very important, like China and Indonesia. They are the big markets, but haven't seen in your study yet. So how is your study and your knowledge about the Asia Pacific that you are going to help the corporate here that get into those big markets?
Yes, so because of the Mobile World Congress in Shanghai coming up, we've actually held back some of the Asia data to launch at that event. So some of it we already have, some of it we're going to be running for the first time, but we're going to have as I said, I think it's about maybe 8 or 10 markets within Asia, which expands on, I think we've got India, Philippines, Singapore, and there at the moment. There are going to be a whole lot of other markets that we'll be adding in shortly, and able to actually benchmark. The beauty of the study is that within a brand or a category within Singapore, you could go, what about auto A versus auto B, or travel company A versus travel company B? Or you could actually go, how do I compare against travel companies in the world or autos in the world? Or alternatively, you could go, how does my brand, if I want the best consumer experience for, again, let's just say an auto, how does that compare against Uber and Facebook? And if that's my North Star and exactly where I want my business to head, you can do those comparisons. So we've also got, and the team here has access to a tool in the back end that can give you all of those comparisons and where are you strong, where are you weak, but most importantly, help you with understanding how to improve those things. So we can actually go, okay, so compared against your key competitors, your site loads in 8 seconds versus your competitors loading in 5. Here are 5 things you can do to make that faster. You don't currently have very good menus and navigation. Here's some ways that you can actually use horizontal swiping navigation as well as vertical navigation by, here's some techniques. So the thing about it is very practical, and because it's based on data and it's completely objective, we can go, here's a problem and here's a solution. So we're able to do that across the market studied, and also any of the brands that we want to additionally look at, we can add those in the meantime, and then we're looking at another significant launch at the Shanghai World Congress.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Can I just ask everybody, last round of applause. Thank you to Travis for coming all the way.
Thank you.